Hey everyone, a real quick preamble before we launch into this one. I want to have just a little extra time spent enjoying my favorite month this year, so next week, instead of my normal schedule, I'll do a minimum of 2 in 1 minute review-a-mans, if not 3, and a normal video for Sunday. And then closing out October will be the Halloween special, either on Wednesday or I may just push it to Thursday for the holiday. And with that, welcome to episode 500 of my show. Yes, I know it says that I have more videos than that, the shorts count in the number that you're seeing, but I don't count those. This is episode 500 of the true full series, and I can think of few ways better to say thanks for sticking with me through half of 1,000 videos and almost 10 million views than to welcome you to What's the Best? What's the best 86 Dinobot that I own? Which is all of them. Unless they are absolutely insane and make a slash. But first, your likes! Please do, and maybe subscribe. And let's go in release order. I have talked so many times about 86 Grimlock. He might be the most discussed figure on my channel, and there's a good reason for that. This figure is so great that it earned not 1, not 2, not 3, but at least 4 different upgrade kits. I spent basically more than double the figure's price, turning it into the best version of itself. However, I'm not going to take those into account while looking at it here. It's not fair to the others. But the fact that I bought them for him and none of any of the rest may be a sign of how this video is going to turn out. Grimlock is kind of one of those astonishing figures that everyone who gets their hands on just can't deny. It manages to look great, feel great, look accurate, have 2 great modes, a great scale that feels right, poses very nicely, and just be fun. This guy set the tone for the 86 Dinobots in a really killer way, and a really strange way. It's pretty clear that this dude is at odds with the rest of the 86 aesthetic. All that extra surface sculpting that makes him just that little bit less accurate to the animation model, the slightly wrong head, the sharper angles in the arms and toes. This is awesome looking, and you aren't going to mistake this figure for one of any other character, but there are some extreme liberties taken, which just isn't the MO of the rest of the line. Transformation is good, and the Dino mode also rocks, but once again, there's a noticeable change in the Dino teeth, not being part of his lips. And I would just love for one of these figures to ever get that detail right. Am I the only one who thinks it looks way cooler and more menacing like that? Second, and an immediate, huge step down, is Slag. And I just don't understand. And I will die on this hill any day of the week, he is Slag. I don't give a shit that it's a mildly bad word in the UK. 99% of the English-speaking world's population does not live in that country, and it does not mean that to them. And no, I'm not just talking about the US. If you aren't going to use Slag because of that, you also can't use cookie, or bender, or Siri, or shabby, or puff, or a ton of other words that just mean offensive things in other countries. It costs 1 cent to change the printing on the box for them to have their own in the UK. I will not be gaslighted into saying that a character who was named one thing for 30 years before they got their panties in a twist about its name is okay to be changed to appease a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the audience, because most people in the UK also don't care. Anyways, this thing is such a downgrade from Grimlock, but robot mode is not where the worst of this thing's issues lie. I mean, he is absolutely too wide like this, looking hyper awkward, and the backpack has this delightful little issue where it loves falling down and falling to pieces, but the posability is great, one of the best of the group, and it's mostly accurate. Though I will always resent a Slag who has a faux forming chest. The OG Slag was one of my first toys ever, and the coolest part of the whole dude was having the jaw hinge down to form the chest. The legs on this guy look a little weird, but no, the true sin of this figure is in the transformation. I have literally never once been able to transform this thing without knocking off one or both of the wings, and I have rarely been able to do so without doing that to the tail as well. The whole process also has a bad case of the Play-Doh factor, where the parts that fall off if you even dare think about them a little too hard all have to be squished into place, making it even more certain that he will explode into a shower of parts. And then he faux forms for like, literally no reason. The chest is whatever, but the feet seem to do it just because. I cannot come up with an explanation as to why it works like this. It seems like they added this just to have the legs not work the way that you expect them to, and I think it's probably a big part of what sabotages the whole conversion. So much bad about this figure is in service of this back end that makes no sense. And then the Triceratops mode is fine, the rear legs could use some work, but this is mostly accurate. Though I also think that he is the most boring looking of the Dinobots in general no matter what. Third is Sludge, and almost appropriately, he is both amazing and tragic. Sludge, if you get a good copy, will be a contender for the best of the team. And if you get an all too common bad copy, it will be a heartbreaking wreck that can't stand. Fortunately, mine doesn't suffer those issues, so this thing rules. Among the Dinobots, he might be the most accurate looking. Slag could have been that if he simply wasn't too wide. Grimlock had too many liberties taken. Snarl has a head that they flat out made up because there was never a great shot of it in the show, and Swoop also suffers from the wide boy syndrome. Sludge also, if he doesn't pose the best, is probably the second best, able to get a slew of stances really easily, and then you have his transformation, which is a thing of genius. While Slag was not like you'd anticipate him to be, seemingly for the sake of just violating your expectations, and that turned out terrible, only one maneuver on Sludge is the way that any other figure of him has ever done it before, and that's just the dino head swinging up. Everything else is a complete magical chaos explosion, again, seemingly for the sake of being different, but where Slag sucks because of it, Sludge rules. One of the coolest and most inventive conversions I've ever had the pleasure to handle. And then the dino mode is also great. It gets a little ropey around the tail section, but this captures his dino vibe way better than most other figures he's ever gotten. It's really all in the head, but the cute little front arms and the tail ridges give this thing life. Then Snarl is Snarl, and inevitable. Everyone acted like he wouldn't be added because he was only barely in the movie, but then this thing showed up and shit down all our throats by being one of the best, in spite of everyone's lack of confidence in him. Yeah, I don't know why people thought he wouldn't be here. It's legitimately just a bad meme that people were taking as gospel for how the toy line would go. Anyways, this thing has one weird trait in that the robot head is off doing its own thing, but everything else about this guy is top tier. The body really carries the vibe of the character more so than most of the others on his team, and once again, if he's not the most posable of the Dinobots, then he is the second most, having the first truly maximum elbows, while Slag had the first maximum knees. All of these dudes, with the exception of Slag, feel about the same level of durable, and Snarl's transformation is one of the most clever and inventive ones, while still being simple enough to not ever get frustrating, regardless of the situation. As much as I love Sludge's transformation, I hate doing it on camera, just because it is complex enough to get annoying in that circumstance. Then the alt mode is basically perfect. I think this might be the only Snarl figure out there with an accurate dino head, as most others try to make it a bit cooler than it actually was in the show. The biggest issue I have with this thing is just the way that the tail is this static option that basically hangs out underneath him. But otherwise, this is a top tier mode. Lastly, and likely worstly, is that even a word? Swoop. This is just one of the most infuriating figures I've ever handled. It's better than I feared it would be, but nowhere near as good as it should have been. Since making my video on this, I've seen a lot of people trying to convince me that no, Swoop was really shorter than the rest of the Dinobots. Then they typically send me a picture of him standing in the background behind the others on his team and go, see, he's shorter there. Yes, he's further away. That's how that works. But let's, for a second, pretend, and we take it for granted that he is the shortest one, that it's super obvious in the show that he is shorter than the rest of them. It's not obvious like that in the actual show, but let's say that it is. What does that have to do with anything? My argument is that this is the laziest, cheapest one, and they didn't try and earn our money in any way. They didn't even make him out of as much material as the rest of them, while having generally less posability, a way worse alt mode, an inaccurate design, and a way more simple transformation. It's kind of ancillary to the point, don't you think? And I would all remind you that in the show, Grimlock is not bigger than Optimus, and I don't give a shit what one of the 1,000,001 inaccurate scale charts says. The scale charts were always wrong. The show never displayed them as they are depicted in those charts. And you know what those charts tend to agree on anyways? The fact that Ultra Magnus is also not bigger than the Dinobots. That means no matter which way you slice it, chart or no, the scale does not matter. This is the Dinobots are the big badasses of the Autobots scale that they're going for. So why is it that Swoop is the smallest and the worst in almost every way? Especially in the Dino mode, which is hideous thanks to a deeply inaccurate, goofy-looking head, bad proportions, and a near-complete lack of posability. This mode doesn't even feel like him, regardless of what you may or may not want to argue is specifically accurate details. So, what's the best? Sadly, the worst is extremely hard to pick. Swoop is just so phoned in, it's really hard to argue that he shouldn't be the worst. He's the one at the wrong scale. He's the one with the most botched sculpt. He's the one with the laziest, simplest transformation. He's the one with the deeply incorrect alt mode where the backpack becomes a fanny pack. And I don't want to hear it, British viewers! Fanny is your ass, and slag is a metal byproduct. The only thing this has going for him is decent articulation, and even then, there's no reason his elbows only go 90. But the thing is, I don't hate handling this thing like I hate handling Slag. It's almost impossible to touch this thing without parts falling off. It is flat out impossible to transform this thing without the wings on the backpack falling off. So while it's not particularly complicated, the whole conversion is profound misery, where you are trying to get this useless floppy noodle on his spine that won't hold place or together at all to line up and slip down this ravine at this unnatural angle while every part of it rapidly falls off and has to be pegged back on. To top it off, the modes aren't as accurate as they should be, and it even faux forms for the sake of being a super special butterfly. Based on my rating system, both of these figures are actually tied for 5th place at 0 points. And do you know what? That's fair. Neither one deserved the title of the worst more so than the other. Both of these things are kind of fucking travesties in their own ways. Slag desperately needed more care put into his QC, more pins, a slightly resculpted robot mode, and to not sabotage the transformation just for the sake of being unique. And Swoop really just needed any level of care from people outside of the factory, who at the very least seemed to give a shit about giving him good QC and doing some running changes to make him slightly more accurate. Then from there, this may shock you, 86 Grimlock with 6 points is number 3. A really good showing from him, but in comparison with the rest of the 86 Dinobots, he doesn't really have any aspect uniquely going for him. I love this figure to death, but in truth, he is kind of middle of the road in everything. He's pretty accurate, but not the most accurate. He's pretty cool looking, but about as cool as the other cool ones. He's really good quality, but as good quality as the other ones who had the factories do a good job. He's got a fun transformation, but it's not the most fun. He's got a great alt mode, which is about as good as the other alt modes. He has no weakness, but at the same time, there is nowhere you can call him the best of the pack at anything either. And to be fair, that's because the top 3 figures are some of the best things Hasbro has ever made. So he's in good company, but he's not standing above them. Then number 2, with 8 points, is Snarl. And like Grimlock, Snarl has no weakness, but he does manage to stand out just a little more in some areas. The scores are almost identical, save for 2 places. Robot modes are about as accurate as each other's, with both having the wrong heads. While Grimlock has the slightly more correct head, Snarl has the more correct body. Quality is about the same, and while I like the feel of Grimlock's plastics better, neither one of these has a loose joint or a part that's about to break, and Snarl's joints are mildly tighter. Transformation between the two is about as good as well. Grimlock has a very smooth version of his classic conversion, while Snarl is more inventive and interesting, but slightly more frustrating for it. But where Snarl excels is the posability, having more useful ranges in the head and way better arms. And while I love both of their ult modes, it's fair to say that Snarl's without the upgrade kit at least doesn't have big screw holes in the side of his face, and is more accurate thanks to the attention paid to his dino head sculpt. And lastly, just barely eking out the victory is Sludge with 9 points. Though, despite the fact that my copy is fine, with the sheer commonality of the bad QC with this figure, I could be persuaded to dropping him a point in the quality category. Well, dropping another point in that, because I already did that just to be fair, despite the fact that, again, my copy is fine. But if I did do that, it would just make this thing the equal of Snarl. Like, he can't drop enough points to do any less than tie for victory, as he has one of the best posabilities, he has one of the best accuracies, he has one of the best ult modes, and he has by far the best transformation. If the great Sludgy here wasn't notorious for QC issues, this would be a figure that I tell absolutely everyone to run out and buy constantly like I do Siege, Skyfire, and Optimus Prime. Because with my copy here, it leaves no doubt. Thanks to doing everything great and having a mind-blowing transformation that will reshape your understanding of physical reality, so that way everywhere you walk, you hear metal music played from on high, where the singer is just screeching Sludge's name over and over again. 86 Sludge is the best. And the 86 Dinobots, despite having some of the most amazing figures I've ever handled in them, leave me wanting. Slag could have been easily fixed. His worst issues are all stuff that tighter QC and a few more pins could fix. You'd still need to remold him to be slightly less wide for optimal results, and the faux forming will always be dumb and confusing, as there's seemingly no point. But with Swoop, sadly, they just needed to start over. A complete, catastrophic failure of design. Make him taller, make him thinner, fix his face, fix his other face way harder, improve his posability, put way more engineering into the transformation, and give him an ult mode that looks even a little correct to the trained eye. So as bad as Slag is, he has more hope to become good than Swoop ever does. And that's just way too unfortunate. What is this no shits given era, Hasbro? Why have you suddenly, for the most part, stopped trying? And before we go, let's thank a channel backer. If you want to get on the wheel, join the Patreon or the channel memberships. And this time it's my good friend Beltfed, with Takara Legends Ultra Magnus, a figure that I have desperately wanted to handle since getting back into the fandom. One of the coolest designs to come out of Combiner Wars, and one of the coolest designs to come out of IDW. I don't know that I would have been able to fully appreciate this thing in 2016 when it came out, but having since read through IDW, this has become one of my favorite versions of the character. But let's be real, Magnus tends to get some of the best depictions no matter what the continuity. But this is such a badass design with a sick ult mode and an awesome vibe. I have had a different friend promise to lend me theirs since first starting my channel, so where is it, Roman? It's been 4 years now! How do you forget literally every time we hang out? To be fair, I keep forgetting too. I wonder if this version of him will also be bigger than the 86 Dinobots. And that's not half what I have to say, but it's enough what I have to say. And I know, you know, what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So, if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please, share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.